All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm going over the pros and cons of gang stalking. Now, these are some of the things that I've gone through since I've been getting gang stalked. It's been going on for 2.5 years. It started around June, July 2015. And so, one of the first things I encountered between then and now is ridicule. Approaching people and talking to people that are family members, friends, people that I'm not even that familiar with, and telling them about gang stalking, what it is and how it works, and being ridiculed over it. That's one of the negatives of it, or what I perceive to be a negative of it. Another thing is covert drugging. I've ate at several different restaurants where I've had my food drugged, and the first couple of times it was really scary, because when you're eating somewhere at a nice restaurant and you get your food drugged, you don't know what's happening to you. A lot of times this happens to people who are getting gang stalked, and they think, am I dying? Am I going to die? Or is this drug having an effect on me that could last forever? Sort of like a bad LSD trip. That's one of the things that's happened to me several different times, and it's very confusing, because you're trying to make sense out of this situation. I paid for this meal, and now my food's drugged. How did it happen? Who went to the management? Who did this? How did they do it? That's on the negative side of getting gang stalked. Definitely. Character assassination. This happens to many different people who go through gang stalking. They have to endure with something known as character assassination. Electronical weapons. That's a big thing for people who get gang stalked. I've never experienced hearing any voices, voice to skull. I don't really think, or at least not to my knowledge, anybody's used any type of HARP technology or satellites or whatever on me, but I don't know how that works necessarily, so it could be a possibility. But I've had people use electronical weapons on me, though, like electronical guns and stuff people can use on you. This is something to me it's not really embarrassing, because it's happened to so many people who get gang stalked, but it's funny. I had to go to a psychiatric institution for 10 days, and I was gang stalked the whole time I was actually at the psychiatric institution. And I'll briefly tell people about that. I was being gang stalked for a while, about a year and a half up until this point, and I ended up going on a 37-mile walk. And at that point in time, I had been arguing with my mother a lot. And so the nature of what was going on in my life was very hectic. It was a little bit beyond just gang stalking. There's a lot of stuff that was happening to me at the time. And so I went on a 37-mile walk, and I was being gang stalked the whole way. And the police ended up approaching me and asking me if, what I was doing walking. And they asked me to give me a ride home, and I declined, because I was being gang stalked at the time. I didn't want to go with anybody, anywhere, anything. This was like a bad time in my life. This was I wouldn't say I was having a nervous breakdown, but it was a really hectic time in my life. And so they ended up calling the ambulance, because they were saying I could have hypothermia, which is possible. I don't think I had hypothermia, but nevertheless my feet were pretty cold. So I ended up going to a hospital, and then my mother shows up. I called my mother. I had the ER people call my mother. My mother shows up. Now, when I get to the hospital, the doctor asked me 2 questions, and I told him I was thirsty. I wanted a glass of water. Then he asked me another question, and I said, I'm thirsty. I want a glass of water. And so that's the only thing I said to him. And the guy wrote down on a piece of paper that he thought I was paranoid or something like that. And so they were looking at, all I said was I want some water. And so they put down on paper I was paranoid and all this stuff. And they were talking to my mother. 2 women were talking to my mother, and somehow they coerced or convinced my mother. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know how it happened, but she signed me into a psychiatric ward involuntarily for 10 days. And the whole time I was there, the workers at the hospital were doing assignments on me, doing wearing specific colors. Just everything in the hospital was set up to fit into the overall gang stalking assignments and the dialogue. of what somebody experiences when they go through gang stalking. But so I'm in the psychiatric ward, and they're trying to force drugs on me. They're trying to ask me. First of all, they brought a woman came by with a cart with some drugs on it, and she was saying, doctor, why don't you take this? I said, I don't want to take the drugs. And they said, well, come on, go ahead and take them. I said, I don't want them. I don't want any drugs. And I'm in the hospital with a bunch of people who are literally crazy. These people are talking to themselves. Some of these people are on the ground, high off of drugs, like drooling out of their mouth. And I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm thinking in my mind, if I'm going to come out of here crazy after seeing all this stuff. And so I'm in the hospital talking to a bunch of crazy people, telling them I beat gang stalking. That's how hardcore I was about my beat gang stalking stuff. I'm in the psychiatric ward telling the people in there about gang stalking and stuff. And it was a trip. The whole thing was a trip. But so they end up having this little court proceeding in the psychiatric hospital to decide whether or not I'm going to end up taking drugs. So I'm going to try to make this fast. But anyhow, so they bring some lawyer guy. I don't even know who he is, and he comes in, and he's looking at the paperwork that the doctor wrote that said I was paranoid after I asked for a glass of water. And basically, I just told him, I said, well, if this is about me taking drugs, then, the paper is written in law. There's a legal standpoint to this, a legalese, medical language, and, regular English. So there's 3 different languages we're looking at if I'm being diagnosed, and we're going to go into a court. Do we have any dictionaries, law dictionaries, or medical terminology? What definitions are we basing this diagnosis off of? And so the lawyer started looking at me kind of funny, and he realized, I don't know, he thought he was dealing with an idiot or something. He started looking at me kind of funny, and then he pulled me out. He said, come on, man, just take the drugs and you can get out of here in 10 days and all this stuff. Blah, blah. I said, I'm not going to do it, man. I'm just not going to do it. And so after that, some guy came to me and basically told me, he said, all right, Jamil, are you going to go on another 37-mile walk? I said, no. He said, okay, we're going to let you go. And so I ended up leaving the psychiatric institution. And then when I got out, I ended up reestablishing my courses. I came up with a new website called beatgangstalking.com. I started printing out brochures. And right after that, I was literally walking by the same hospital that I was at previously, teaching people, how to be gang stalked. And I had to they put a catheter, if anybody knows what that is. And so I had it, it was crazy. It was a really tripped out experience, but I feel like I accomplished a lot out of that. Like, I didn't look at it as being a situation where I was psychologically broken. If anything, I took it and monopolized on it and used it as an opportunity to understand what people who go through that experience go through. And so it was an overall learning experience, but it's on a negative side, so it's in the negative category. Then gang stalking every day. You go through gang stalking every day when you get gang stalked. Anybody who knows anything about that, street theater, mimicking, gaslighting, yada, 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 that's just something you go through. Fortunately, I'm in an era, if this had been the 1990s, it would probably been a lot worse. Fortunately, I'm in an era where public awareness of gang stalking is becoming more well known. Every so often, increasingly, it's coming into the television news broadcast. People are just becoming more aware of what it is. So I'm thankful that this has happened to me in the era that I'm in. I'm looking at this like within a few years, what's happened to me and what's happened to all these other people I've been talking to, it's going to be more accepted as being the norm. Like, hey, this person's being gang stalked. They're being gang stalked. The people might not have a real true education on what gang stalking is, but they'll loosely know what it means. There'll be others more informed than the next person. So now that's all negative. So on the positive side, since I've been getting gang stalked, I've had the opportunity to help others. And this goes from people who were near suicide. A lot of these people tried to go to their family, they tried to go to their friends, they've tried to go to the government, they've tried to go to the corporations. What I mean by that, like counseling services, independent psychiatrist counseling, and to no avail, they've never had any help. If anything, it just made it worse, and they got gang stalked even more. So helping people from this who had nowhere to turn has been a big thing in my life, because people have emailed me, people called me, people told me, like, your videos woke me up a lot, Jamil. I was near suicide. Some people, I've talked on the phone with some people, and they've actually talked about shooting people or stabbing people because they were angry about getting gang stalked. That's happened numerous times to numerous different people, and I feel that somewhere along the line there's been some success in that these people fortunately didn't actually go out and do anything like that and get themselves in further trouble, complications over their battle with gang stalking. So I feel that I've been a part of their education and their personal success. One person even doesn't even get gang stalked anymore. One of the first people who contacted me was having a real bad time with it, literally near suicide. And I talked to them every single day and got them to a point to where they were approaching the gang stalkers and talking to them. And they were more like aggressive with confronting the people around them about what was happening. And it's pretty amazing. Now the person doesn't even get gang stalked. So that's incredible. So if nobody else, if I didn't beat, people say, hey, you say you beat gang stalking, you're still getting gang stalked. Well, I guess if I didn't beat gang stalking off my course, at least somebody else did. Waking others up. This has been a big thing because there's a lot of people online who don't even know what gang stalking is. They come online every day and they come across new videos that speak about gang stalking. I've had a few people tell me that you have put things in perspective that makes this believable. I accept gang stalking as being real now. The other videos I've seen where people were saying these are all reptilian aliens doing it, or it's witches doing it, or it's all spiritual warfare. Now you've opened me up to seeing it in a more practical sense. And so these are people who are furthering their education on gang stalking. There's a few people on YouTube who don't even get gang stalked, who interview people who get gang stalked, and they talk about it. So waking people up has been a big part of that, the general public. Talking to gang stalkers. 90% of the people who participate in the overall group assignments of organized gang stalking don't actually know what gang stalking is. These could be people who have been approached and said, hey, just watch this person. They may be mentally unstable. Wear a red shirt and follow them around all day, or follow them with your brights on. These people don't know they're participating in gang stalking. They're involved in it. They just don't know what it is. That covers the general 90% of the people who are involved in these assignments. So I've had an opportunity to speak to some of these people and let them know from my perspective what gang stalking is. I was at a house one night and there was a woman who kept smiling at me and laughing, and I'm thinking, I asked her, like, what's going on? And she was wearing she put on a red shirt and was following me around, and she informed me that she had been contacted through Facebook, and the people told her basically to put on a red shirt and to follow me around because I was, quote unquote, maybe mentally unstable. So I was being gang stalked by a woman who thought her job was to watch me for some sort of mental thing. That happens a lot to people who get gang stalked. That's a perfect routine of how it works, how this networking occurs. And so after explaining it to the woman, then she was like, really? Wow. And I started showing her videos on YouTube about how it works. And so talking to the gang stalkers has been a big part of that. I've had people contact me who were gang stalkers. One woman contacted me. This wasn't in person. It was through email. And she told me she was approached at a shopping mall, giving $100. She was told to follow a certain individual around, a man around, and her job was to change her hair color and to follow him with the brights on the car. After she was approached in person, she would be contacted through a 1-800 number that was like an anti-smoking advertisement. It was like a stop smoking ad that would call her phone, and that was her cue to go about gang stalking people. They would give her the information through the phone, who the targets were that she was to be gang stalking, and they would tell her her assignments to wear different colors and do all this stuff. And she told me that she didn't even know what she was a part of, and she went online and started Googling this stuff, and she discovered it was gang stalking, and then she felt bad about it. She didn't want to be a part of it anymore. She looked at it as like this was a nefarious, evil thing, and she was afraid to stop doing it. She was afraid to speak about it. She didn't want to come out and talk about it on the phone. She told me that if she had been talking about it, they would hear her, therefore they might start gang stalking her. And so I discovered that this was a moral thing. The woman lacked the leadership skills to quit doing what she wanted to quit doing. She didn't feel she had the leadership skills to do that within her own self, but she contacted me for help. And so I told her basically, tell me everything you know, and she told me as much as she could, but she didn't know any more than that. And I said, well, come see me and talk to me on the phone. She didn't want to do that. I said, come see me in person. She said she couldn't afford to do that. And so I basically said, well, if you're going to keep doing this, find out as much as you can and then report it back to me. And I never heard from her again. So that was an instance of somebody doing gang stalking that contacted me for assistance. I've spoken to people. When I was out on foot, I met a woman who used to be gang stalked. She lived in the deep south, and she was being gang stalked every single day. She was exposing, I guess, some local corruption in the area, and she just started getting hit bad, and then she moved all the way up north to get away from the gang stalking. And then she was doing assignments on me one day, and I started talking to her about it and explained to her what gang stalking was. Then she discovered exactly what was happening. She might not even know. The funny part is she might not have literally have known what she was doing was gang stalking, even though she had been gang stalked before that, or maybe she did. But so I met people on foot who were who had previous encounters with gang stalking. So that's just a list of negative. So at the end of the day, me helping somebody out of suicide, or me helping somebody to figure their life out that's near end, that by itself out-trumps the ridicule, it out-trumps the covert drugging, it out-trumps the character assassination, it even out-trumps the electronic weapons, it even out-trumps the psychiatric institution, and it even out-trumps the gang stalking every day. So that alone has placed me within myself on a scale of victory. No matter what I went through, I've been able to assist others, and that was my whole goal in beating gang stalking. So I think I was victorious alone on that. Waking others up, I look at that like that's going to happen naturally. If I'm on the YouTube talking about gang stalking, somebody's going to come across it and see it. But that's a plus. That's a plus. Talking to the gang stalkers. That's been a plus for me. That's been a really good thing for me within myself. It's helped others to share insight to them, but within myself, it's helped me to get through my day-to-day situation. My whole strategy for beating gang stalking was just walk up to the people on the street and start talking to them. That's how I discover most of these people don't know what gang stalking is, or if they do, they're not really aware of all the other things that's happening to me. And so I used to go into stores, and the store managers would be acting weird, and then I eventually got tired of it. I got tired of going into stores. I got tired of being looked at like I was some 13-year-old shoplifting in the store. And so I just started approaching the managers and talking to them. And sometimes it would get into like a 20-minute conversation. Sometimes it would get into like a 45-minute conversation. And it would go from gang stalking to everything else going on in the world. Sometimes it would go into UFOs and all types of interesting stuff. And then when I walked back into the store, even though the store was participating in the gang stalking assignments, they knew who I was, and they knew what gang stalking was. And so for me, that was a major victory. And to this day, I always do that. It went from waving at the people doing the assignments to approaching them in person and talking to them, to passing out flyers, to passing out business cards. And since then, it's just turned into a thing of, now I don't even really do it as much because I'm so used to doing it. I just look at it like, do I really want to talk to them or not? So that was kind of a growth stage I went through. But every now and then, depending on the person, I'll approach them and talk to them. Oh yeah, there is one thing. There's another thing I forgot within the pros. There was a woman I was seeing for a couple months. This was shortly after I came out of my courses. I came out of my courses of beating gang stalking in June of 2016, and not long after that, I came across a woman that we were hanging around each other every day, and she participated in gang stalking me, and she was able to actually educate me on how it works. I was able to see how she would have information sent to her smartphone. She would be shown on Google Map where to drive to do the gang stalking assignments. So they would show, like if I was walking on the street, they would show her on her Google Map phone like little dots where to go, or they would tell her they would show her the cross sections of where to go. And that was how she was doing the gang stalking assignments. Even when I was with her in the car, she would pull into certain gas stations and do certain stuff. And they were teaching her through her phone where to go to participate in the overall group stalking. If I had not been with her every day, I wouldn't even have that insight, to be honest with you. And so that became a big part of my development and learning about gang stalking and being able to educate others Then they would contact her through Facebook. This is a woman who, would sleep over my house sometimes. And so she would be told in the morning, they would contact her and say, hey, put on this color shirt or put on these color clothes. And so I would learn from that, like how these people are doing this, why they're doing it. And this was somebody who would be gang stalking me on the street and come pick me up afterwards. It was pretty interesting. It was a pretty interesting experience. Yeah, so, and that's what I encourage other people to do that. If you're being gang stalked, start a list of the pros and the cons. And usually the pros far outweigh the cons. Now, if you're working a steady job, or you're going to a university, or you're involved in a church group, it's going to be really challenging to maintain that kind of life as you once did before if you're being gang stalked. So a lot of my advice about walking up to people and talking to people and doing this and that, it will only help to a certain degree. A lot of this stuff you may have to stop. If you're working a certain job and you cannot function anymore at your job for whatever reason, this may be an opportunity for you to go out and find a new job or become your own business person. If you are married, there are a lot of people actually lose their spouse. They lose, women lose their husband, husbands lose their wives because of gang stalking. And it may be an opportunity, if you can somehow make it work with the other person, that's good. But it may be an opportunity to analyze your life more properly and figure out, maybe I'm not with the right person. A lot of people end up getting married and they're supposed to be together forever. But if a little thing like gang stalking can tear a marriage apart, and gang stalking is not a little thing, but if something like that can tear a marriage apart, then it wasn't meant to be anyway. If the other person isn't strong enough to balance that situation out, then you don't really want to be around them. And I know that's difficult for a lot of people because a lot of people have children. They've had years of stuff, good experience with this person. So maybe taking a break and then coming back and talking to the person later might be most helpful. I found that a lot of people who go through gang stalking have a really difficult time with the marital issues. And I have a blog online that talks about the 3 stages of gang stalking. I break it down to the confusion stage, the distraction stage, and the sensitization stage. Visual and audio, which is the visual assignments, the street theater, the color coding, the mimic, people using objects. They may use cars, they may pull cars in their driveway in a certain sort of way with certain colors, when you come back and forth from your house. Individuals, that falls into individuals and objects. Audio, these are noise campaigns. Noise campaigns go on usually the majority of the time the person's getting gang stalked throughout the day. Even when you're in your house, neighbors and different sorts of people may be creating noise artificially through music, some sort of loud stereo playing, or it could be natural, them yelling on purpose at certain times and whatever. All this stuff is well coordinated and strategically orchestrated. So that's why it's so upsetting to people, is because noises, begin to happen routinely throughout the day. And these are attempts to sensitize an individual to the stalking that's happening to them. And that's where a lot of frustration comes in, where people are talking about they're making noise at certain times, yada, yada, yada. These aren't just people just yelling. This is orchestrated purposely to stalk an individual, to use group stalking on somebody. So visual, audio, then the 3 stages. Confusion, distraction. Confusion usually happens in an individual's life. When they first start getting gang stalked, it happens for days, weeks, months, years, till the individual finds out exactly what's happening to them. Then the distraction plays on the psyche of the individual, trying to use the individual's personal feelings or emotional attachment to concepts or people or places or things against them. They subliminally attach the inherent meanings of certain things to the themes. Like if somebody went to a certain college, they may have people participating in the overall gang stalking assignments wearing a t-shirt that has the name of the university printed on it. And so now you're being gang stalked by people wearing a university shirt of a university you went to. These are sorts of tricks and ways they mess with people's minds. When I'm talking about distraction stage, emotional connotation. And then the sensitization stage is pretty obvious. This is a place where you're being gang stalked and group stalked, and you know you're being group stalked. And the individuals behind the group stalking want you to believe that, or they're trying to press upon you an image that that's it for your life. You're just being stalked, and that's it. And they don't want you to look at the world as if there's opportunity out there. If there's new people you can meet, if there's new possibilities you can expand out of that. For the level of financing behind group stalking somebody and the level of networking and all this stuff behind it, it sways back and forth. It's not difficult to make somebody feel that they're getting stalked 24/7, who's actually getting stalked 24/7. So, that's why it works so well. But anything's possible. You can always try to make new opportunities out of any situation. I just started approaching the people and telling them what's going on and what gang stalking is and promote my courses. So I don't really trip off of anybody's intentions behind it. But anyhow, that's the positives and negatives, the pros and the cons.